Welcome to Tammany Tech 101. I'm Grant Black, Director of Technology for St. Tammany Parish Government. Increasing access to high-speed internet is a priority for President Cooper, and we want to ensure that our citizens grow in their digital literacy. Today on Tammany Tech, we talked to Robert Crawford, fireman for District 4. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Grant.
So we talk about firemen. I think firemen and IT don't generally kind of mix, but because IT, you're mainly IT for fire department?
Yeah,
almost exclusively?
Yeah.
And where's District 4?
So District 4 encompasses both the incorporated and unincorporated areas surrounding Mandeville. So you think from the Defuncta River over east to Lacombe, and then as far, probably 5 miles north of I-12. So
okay. Pretty big district.
Yeah, 70 square miles, and I think we got 60-something thousand people.
How many stations?
4, and we're building 2.
So that's the second largest in the parish?
Second largest, correct, yeah. We are the second largest fire district in St. Tammany Parish. We also have a ambulance service, hazmat techs, hazmat team, you name it, we got it.
Okay. So how do you become an IT guy for the firemen? That seems kind of a funny path.
Yeah, so my dad, I grew up around the fire service. My dad, he was a fireman. He's now a district chief, actually, for District 2. And so I've always been surrounded by public safety since I was young. And so naturally, at one of the Christmas parties, that conversation kind of occurred. And I started doing IT for District 13. And in the process of that, I also rode on the truck and got to learn what makes the fire service the fire service, right?
So as an IT guy for 13, you basically were like, hey, I want to go get on the truck too?
A little bit, yeah.
So what did you do before? What were you doing IT-wise, or what got you?
So really, I started that in high school. So ever since I was young, I had always been interested in computers. Actually, I remember, I think I was 12 years old when I argued with the HP rep for probably about 3 hours on the phone trying to get a laptop fixed. So started out doing that, general home stuff. And then in high school, at the time, there was a program called, colloquially we called it the CCNA program, where in high school you could actually get industry-based certification.
So that's Cisco Certified Network Associate?
Yeah, the CCNA, right, Cisco Certified Network Associate. And so in high school you could actually get that certification. Along with IT fundamentals and stuff like that.
Is that the entry level for Cisco networking?
Actually, they have a CCENT, I believe. Okay. That's below that. Okay. And then you have CCNA that's above that.
It's basically network. Understand?
Yes,
how networks work, subnets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, VLANs, routing protocols, the iGrip, RIP version 2, all that fun stuff.
Sure.
But from there, I actually found out about a program called Cyber Patriot. And least to say, when I was in ROTC, I didn't care much about PT, nor did I care much about the rifle competition, but I found out about Cyber Patriot, and I was like, hey, Commander, I would like to try this program. And so we actually, our first year, we made it to the semifinals. We had no external influence. I was actually teaching all of my own guys, and we actually made it to the national finals my senior year in Washington, D.C. Actually got to meet the Secretary of the Air Force. And,
so what is the competition? Like, what do you do?
So you harden virtual machines. So what that means is you try and find vulnerabilities in them, right? And you apply best practices to those as well. It's a wonderful program. It teaches you really the fundamentals of cybersecurity very practically.
Sure. So it's the defense side of Capture the Flag?
Yes, but they do have some offensive capabilities, even though they tend not to say that too much. It's always interesting. You hear in the K through 12 space, when you're teaching kids cybersecurity, right? It's like, oh, we're not teaching you how to hack. And it's like, well, if they know how to prevent,
they
can deduce. The same coin. Right.
I mean, I remember when I was learning how to defend, I would always go get the hacker guidebooks or whatever.
Right.
Because you have to get in that mindset of, well, what am I defending against?
Right, precisely. So we did that, and that was wonderful. I actually mentored for a few years with that program, and actually made it to the national finals again. From there, I went into private sector for a little bit. Didn't really get on board with the missions and scope of it. One of the cool things about government is you're not serving one person or kind of like just, hey, we're here for profit. No, in government, you're serving the people. And the implications of your job, if you do it well, they're wonderful for a lot more people than just one person or anything like that. So
Well, it's a more holistic approach of I'm not protecting a company for profit. I'm trying to make people's lives better.
correct. Yeah, and jumping back to the fire service conversation a little bit, a lot of people, just like you're saying, like what technology exists in the fire service, right?
Well, I'll be honest. When I first started talking to you about it, I was very surprised.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I mean, a lot of people seem to think that the fire service is kind of stuck in the 80s, right? When today it's a lot more than what it was. We have all forms of sophisticated analysis like GIS. So when we're doing station planning, that GIS, Geographic Information Systems, we're able to load in our call data, response time benchmarks and stuff like that, and through that analysis we determine the location of new stations. So that was exactly the process we did with the 2 new stations.
So you're literally going out and mapping where fires are happening and what the response time is,
absolutely.
and then trying to minimize that response
Yeah,
time.
so NFPA 1710 is what we use, or the benchmark or standard that we use for deployment analysis.
Sure.
With that, you have certain standards based on whether it's a structure fire. I want to say there's even a standard for EMS. I'm not sure about that, but we have internal standards for those as well. So we apply those standards. So let's say you have a group of medical calls, right? So you filter out all your medical data, apply that, and then you go, okay, if we have all these medical calls, we want to benchmark at the 90th percentile of 4 minutes. So you run that through the analysis, and then it spits out, okay, this is where you need to deploy those resources.
So you use the GIS systems for that.
Oh, absolutely.
I would say in the district, yeah, we have a district in the parish, and I think Esri's told us we're one of the few parishes or areas that have groups working together like that, with firemen, assessor, mosquito abatement.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's very holistic. And you guys, I mean, you're doing a lot. You're tracking fire trucks?
Yeah, so part of dispatching the appropriate unit, the closest unit, right, or one of the components of that is we have to know where that truck is.
Sure.
So through GIS, we actually have a component called Geo Event. What that allows you to do is feed data into it, manipulate it, and spit a product out. When we do that, we actually provide that to the dispatch center, and they're actually able to see where that truck is in real time and dispatch the appropriate resource.
And that monitor you have that tracks all that, I mean, you're tracking interstate, you're tracking speeds on the road. I mean, you really, you do a great job as far as just getting the vehicles there as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. The real-time data component of the fire service is really one of the more difficult aspects. Anytime you're dealing with real-time data, it's demanding on resources and software.
I think yes, post-storm assessment. So after Hurricane Ida, Parish went out. We did assessments, assessing damage and those things. We had to report to FEMA. The tools you use, because the fire department helps, which a lot of people might not know.
Yes.
But you guys had a different tool that we're all switching to now.
Yeah, so originally we built a tool on Quick Capture. We collected, I forget the number of structures, but I want to say it was well over 1,000 damaged structures within that 70 square mile jurisdiction that we have. And we had some lessons learned on that tool. We transitioned to a new one called Field Maps. It's still from the same company, but since it's a newer tool, it has better offline functionality and is generally more user-friendly.
Sure.
So we built the solution on that, and we've collaborated with parish government, other fire districts, municipal government to deploy this and provide a better service to our constituents, right? So
I know with our system, the way it worked before is we'd go run the assessment, put it in. Our GIS folks would then go manually map each spot, each point. So it was like a 48-hour turnaround.
Sure.
With this tool now,
it's real time.
So the moment it's assessed, it immediately updates.
Correct.
We have an active map at all times.
Yes, absolutely. Another component of that is when you're out doing an assessment, oftentimes you run into citizens who they need assistance, but it's not an emergency. So, for example, like an oxygen-dependent person or someone who's elderly, another component of that app is we built that functionality in as well, so that way we can document that and get it back to the appropriate people.
That's fantastic. So something else you kind of champion is road closures.
Yeah, so as with everyone else in St. Tammany Parish, right, I have to drive. And man, I tell you what, if I drive up and a road's closed and I have to turn around, I don't want to do that. So one of the things we've done is we have incorporated into that app as well road closures that publish to Waze and Google Maps.
Sure.
So that allows any of our personnel, and also with that collaboration through the GIS district, anyone else in that district to publish road closures as well.
So those road closures get published, Google Maps, Waze, so you will be actively moved as a road closes or opens.
Correct, yes. Like I said, if I'm driving and a road's closed, I want to know. In fact, Facebook's been a great resource for that, but do we really want people driving around looking at Facebook? No, so Google Maps it is.
Yes, I know we're working with our Public Works Department now. So they'll be out at the barns all across the parish, I think there are 12.
Yeah.
And they'll be running around being with the ability to open or close roads as it's, as things happen.
Yeah.
Like a bridge out the other day, and immediately went out and was able to route citizens in the right direction.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's a service that saves everybody time. That's the one thing we don't have more of, time. So anything we can do to save other people time, we're on it.
So when you first got to District 4, everything was on premise on a physical machine.
Yeah, so one of those components of GIS is there's a lot of servers that run with it, along with just a whole host of other servers that we have. We moved to a cloud-based provider that was substantially cheaper and more reliable. Just a dedicated fiber internet connection can run you anywhere between $500 and $1,000 a month, which that's a substantial amount of money. So if you
hardware investment.
Oh yeah, hardware investment too. I mean, we were, being a smaller governmental agency, we were not necessarily buying new stuff. We were buying refurb. And so that's always, catch-22. So we implemented a lot of high availability with that. But if you can go with a cloud provider, pay less than an internet connection to host those services, you're forced to do that. That's the thing that makes sense. So.
Well, then you don't have to worry about a server going down.
Correct.
If something breaks, you're not on the phone with HP or Dell or whoever and trying to get this server resolved. You have no service in the interim.
Right. Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is we're processing emergency information, So having that investment to something that's cloud-based and that's reliable, it's a truly good thing.
At that point, your concern is really exclusively internet connection.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the interesting thing. I don't know if people know, but in southeastern Louisiana, we get hit with hurricanes and all sorts of severe weather, right? And I know during Ida, we had several fiber providers that did not have internet. So if we had on-premise infrastructure at that time, it would not be accessible to, let's say, anyone using Verizon. So that I guess you could say segmentation almost, that hey, realistically the cloud's never going to go down like that. They
have enough redundancy built in.
Right.
That if something happened on the West Coast, it's not going to affect the East Coast, so you can just move, and it could be fairly transparent.
Right. So having it cloud-based is going to allow us to have access in the event of a disaster normally.
And at that point, you're not worried about a particular server with a particular IP address that has a map over here. It's just literally internet connection to that URL.
And fortunately, I mean, after Hurricane Ida, one of the providers managed to stay up with cell service. And then another provider flew in a blimp and provided service for those customers, I think 48 hours after, or 24.
I was impressed with the corporate partners that came in and helped us out. It was really outstanding.
Yeah, so with that in mind, for local government, particularly in disaster-prone areas, if you have that kind of surety that you're going to have internet connectivity within 24 or 48 hours after a disaster, yeah, you can make that move pretty confidently.
I think President Cooper, had said right after the storm, it's a new utility.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's what we found is after Ida, people were calling in, when is the power coming up? And absolutely, as soon as power came up, when is internet? I mean, that was the next question.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you do have other service providers out there that are satellite-based, particularly these low-orbit, non-geostationary satellites. But those also tend to cost a little bit of money too, particularly on the government and business side. But hopefully, as we progress into the future, those costs come down. And like I've told my chief, if we have a hurricane that knocks out a satellite, we've got bigger problems than internet.
That's a big deal. But I think there's nothing like a nice solid fiber connection in.
Oh yeah, I mean, when it comes to latency, right? But being smaller government,
the drivers for you going virtually, I mean, it's quite a bit. It's almost exclusively cost.
Yeah, almost exclusively cost. And another thing that we do that's a little different from a lot of other, it's interesting. When it comes to operating systems, large enterprises run Linux, and then medium enterprises tend to run a lot of Windows, and then small business almost exclusively Windows. We switched to entirely Linux, which saved, you want to talk about costs on licensing.
Well, licensing, and also, you don't need as much overhead. There's no GUI, so it's much easier to run, much more efficient.
And stable, very stable. So
anything I run at my house, I run on Linux. Your computers for the kids with Windows, but Linux is just such a great operating system.
Yeah, and also your attack surface tends to be reduced. It's not entirely limited. You do have some people with the train of thought of, well, just publish a Linux server and you don't have to worry about anything. It's like, well, no.
I think some of the reason that you have that reduced threat vector is mainly because you have more experienced users using it that are more aware of locking it down.
Yeah, well, and it's not as common, right? Most of the cyber quote-unquote activity that we see today are attacks of opportunity, not so much targeted direct attacks at one particular organization or enterprise. So, for example, ransomware. Ransomware, it's very rare that ransomware is targeted at one particular company. Generally, it's one big mass spam list that's sent out, and somebody clicks a link, and Joe in accounting loads ransomware on his computer. And
well, especially now, we have ransomware as a service. You can literally go out and buy a ransomware attack kit.
Right.
Just send emails out.
Yes, and unfortunately, we've seen this progression with backup technologies to allow you to recover fairly easily from that. But now the ransomware vendors are copying your data off premise, keeping a copy of it. And so if you're a medical facility and you've got PHI, they're threatening the medical facility saying, hey, I'm going to release all of your patients' records if you don't pay me. And I'm not sure how you prevent that.
In a lot of cases now, they're coming in, they're in the network for 6 months, then they're destroying your backups, corrupting backups before they come in and you know that they're there.
Yes.
So I think that something like a Canary or something server that would alert you to their presence. It's hard to get alerted to presence.
Yeah, it's if you're in a smaller network, fortunately with the fire departments, we're smaller, right? So I've got a pretty good inventory on what's on my network, when, and why.
Sure.
And then we have pretty good isolation. But with the larger agencies such as yours, that's a pretty big problem to solve.
It is. We're very diverse.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought was most impressive with what you're doing out there is the drones, which for us, you came out and you kind of mapped out our water tower forts and some other stuff, but you showed me how you were going out and mapping facilities for safety.
Yeah, so one of the things that a lot of people may not know about is with the fire department, we do something called a pre-plan. What that's designed to do is, first off, familiarize the firefighter with the business. This isn't going to happen with residential buildings, but with commercial, and also what we call target hazards. Target hazards are commercial, but also there's some type of special nuance to that. So think like hospitals, anything that's got high amounts of hazmat. And so what we do is we'll take the drone, fly imagery, and build a 3D model that is accurate within 5 centimeters horizontally and 3 centimeters vertically. And what that allows us to do is, let's say you've got a leak on a roof with a hazardous material. We can actually show the technicians and also the site maintenance people, that model, and they can zoom in and see exactly where that pipe is. So
are you targeting high-risk areas? Are you targeting any particular?
We tend to target, or not tend to target, but we focus on target hazards. We have a handful of buildings that we have flown. Unfortunately, it does take a little bit of time, but our highest risk buildings we have flown. Not to mention, we also fly it on structure fires, hazmats, wildfires.
So when you hit structure fires and wildfires, how are you using it for that?
So one of the things that the drone has is something called thermal imaging. So it's a radiometric sensor that represents temperature in a color palette.
Sure.
So what we can do is we can fly the drone over, look at the structure, and determine where the fire is in the structure to help guide crews where to go. And that's just on structure fires. Also at night, sure, we have a ladder truck that's got a 100-foot stick, but if you have trees around a structure, trying to get light for firefighters working on a roof can be a problem, right?
Sure.
So we'll take the drone, put a spotlight on it, shine a light for the firefighters, and actually make their environment safer.
So it's literally a safety situation, safety concern.
Oh,
with it.
absolutely. Yeah.
And you can get it into places and know whether it's safe or not to go in.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about, let's say, after Hurricane Ida, we had a business, they had a 500-pound propane tank that they were using to fill the smaller propane tanks.
Sure.
And we got a report from Mandeville Police Department that they smelled propane in an area. So we pull up, and I put up the drone, and we could actually see the level, how much product was left in the tank. We could see as it was leaking out, where it was leaking out from.
Is that from thermal imagery? You could tell?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's absolutely a safety thing. It's one of those interesting things that whenever, prior to adopting it, a lot of people thought, oh, hey, this is just kind of, it's an extra thing to have. You know, it'd be nice. And then you adopt it, and everybody's like, where
How do we
is
live
it?
without it?
Right. As with most things, technology, right? So, and then with wildfires, we'll put it up and determine, oh, hey, there's structures over here. And based on wind speed and stuff, we can kind of start calculating out, you know, hey, we have to evacuate that or we don't.
So no, sometimes you'll light a fire to basically kind of stop.
So that's
Does it
going
help you with
to
that?
be that's going to be more forestry.
Okay.
So the way wildfires work, at least in St. Tammany Parish, or really in the state of Louisiana, is forestry has jurisdiction over all wildfires or forest fires. So we'll get out on scene, begin the initial stop, and then they'll come out with dozers and cut a line. Unfortunately, if you have a forest fire, there's probably other forest fires happening. And we've seen that happen recently where we call for forestry and the response is a little delayed because, well, it's dry. And so they may be a parish over or even in our parish working another fire. So we're having to make that stop and protect structures initially until they get out there. So.
Sure. Okay, so if someone wanted to get into the fire department in IT, is there a path?
Generally speaking, it's your larger departments, your accredited departments that have IT people.
Which ones are those?
So accreditation, okay, that's a conversation. So
Well, just which districts? I mean, which districts would
yeah,
be?
so District 1 and District 4
Sure.
in St. Tammany. Now, District 1 and 4 are the only accredited fire departments in the state of Louisiana. District 4 is the only Class 1 accredited department. What the Class 1 means is you have an agency called PIAL. They come in and they look at how you operate. They look at the equipment, your training, all that, and they go, 1 being the best, 10 being the worst, where do you rank on this scale? So we rank number 1, and what that does is actually lower property insurance rates
Sure.
for people who live in our fire district.
Everybody likes it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially right now, right? Everybody's getting that new premium in and going, whew, okay, that's thanks, Ida. But yeah. So.
But you guys help bring that a little bit down.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because the fire departments are one of the only governmental entities that actually put money in a way back into someone's pocket.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, Robert.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it. And thank you for joining us, and join us again for the next episode of Tammany Tech 101.